Hello, hello. This is Chris Park from Arking Games, and this is a tutorial primarily for, I don't even want to say modders, but basically players who would like to create Nebula backgrounds for AI War 2. Um, Very first note, if you are watching this on YouTube and you don't have the quality turned up to 1080p or something along those lines, you're not going to be able to see much of what's going on. So this really requires the HD quality for you to get much out of it. So go ahead and turn that up. Um, Next thing is you will need whatever the most current version of the Unity editor is for um, the game. At the time of this video, it's 5.6.1 P1. The way that you can find that is by searching for Unity patch releases, and you'll find that version. You won't find it under the final versions. But we update that fairly frequently, so um, if you're watching this a few months from now, you're probably going to have to um, find out what the latest version is, which you can do by looking. Um, wow, you can do by looking in wherever your game is installed. You will find an AIW2 modding and GUI folder, and if you click underneath that, then under project settings, you'll find project a product project version, and you can open that up and it'll tell you what editor version you need. If you create anything cool, then please feel free to send that to us. The way that you would do that is you would come under Space BG, and you would probably have created some .mat files, and you can just grab the .mat files. They're incredibly small because they're made up of a bunch of other components, and you can send those to us. And if it fits with the overall kind of tone that we're going for with the game, then we will include those, and everybody will have more variety. Yay! Okay, so assuming you have done all your prep work, you've got Unity installed. Right now, that means on Windows or OS X. However, there is a Linux version of the editor that is in progress and is in a beta state with Unity. So you can probably you can get that, and it would probably work for these purposes. What you're going to need to do is, if you look under the main assets folder, there's a space BG subfolder. Actually, I could have sworn. Actually, okay, sorry. You're going to want to go under examples, and there's an example scene here. If you crack that open, then what you will find is something along these lines, depending on what the version is. In this, if you hold down your right mouse button and then use WSAD and then Q and then E, you can move around. Or if you just hold down the right mouse button, you can turn your view around. If you want to focus on something, you can click on it and then hit F. If your view ever starts doing some weird clipping stuff where like you get close to something and it's just disappearing, then the clipping planes have gotten out of alignment. Just click on something, hit F, and it will fix that for you. Just a general Unity tip. Some of this stuff is not animating because we're not in play mode. That's fine. However, all of the post-processing effects are being applied, so we don't have any particular need to go into the game view. You can stay in the scene view. And you can see the bloom and all that sort of thing. Now, it's important that the bloom and all that sort of thing is applied because the skybox will bloom as well if you make it too bright. So you'll start seeing some pretty crazy things if you are not careful. So what I'm going to do is, now that I have this scene open, the reason I have this scene open in particular is so that I can look at the backdrop relative to other like actual ships. And so if the ships start looking weird against your backdrop, then it's probably not a backdrop that we want to use. And a lot of times, the reason that a backdrop would look weird relative to the ships around it is they have a very bright glow on them, which kind of indicates that it must be kind of dark. Because what has that sort of glow during the day? It just does not look right. Um, and so your backgrounds have to be sufficiently dark for the ships to show up properly. And that was something that had been requested by a number of players anyway, because darker backgrounds tend to show ships and HUD and all that sort of thing better anyway. So the trick then is to make backgrounds that look sufficiently dark without being depressing, but having interesting elements without just being a bunch of smudge. So now we start. All right. So under the Space BG folder, there's a Nebula sphere object we don't care about. There's a bunch of textures in here for various purposes. And we care about the cluster shapes, which all start with the word cluster. Gradients we're not going to worry about right now because this is a separate shader. All the nebula patterns start with NEB. And then we've got some stars patterns, which all start with stars. The reason they start with those things is because then we can find them a little bit easier without having to actually go into those folders. Now, we have the materials folder here, and then for using, there's the for testing one, and then there's the for using ones. I'm going to create a new official one that will actually use the game. I don't have any idea what this thing's going to look like, so I don't really have a name yet for it. Select something that's pre-existing in the for using folder and hit Control D. You now have a copy of that thing. In my case here, I selected Cloudy Wisps Red. Now we have Cloudy Wisps Red 1. If you want, you can go ahead and just drag that into the materials folder so that it's all by itself. It's easier to see what's going on. Now, I can make a bunch of changes over here on the sidebar in the inspector, but none of that is going to affect the skybox because it is not actually applied to the skybox. So this handy little button right here, apply material to space BG, boom. All right, now this is some other material. Both of them just happen to be red. And we've created it. Now, or we've applied it. So now we're going to be able to mess with it. Now, one of the things you're going to want to do is start off with some sort of baseline and then make color variants of it. Now we're going to do that by adjusting the hue, saturation, and value. But before we do that, we need to make some sort of initial baseline based on whatever colors. So there's a whole lot of stuff in this sidebar. It looks overwhelming. Sorry about that. It's really not too terribly difficult. It's just a lot of different things grouped into different sections. So what you're going to do, first of all, now that we've copied something, is we're going to set the final hue offset to be 0, final saturation offset to be 0, and final value offset to be 0. At this point, we have our kind of baseline colors. This will be a little easier to edit. We have a Starfield tint here, which looks pretty weird with the red. We can just go ahead and kind of turn that down for the moment so we don't really see the star field. That way it's kind of out of our way. Now this is the base color, and we can recolor this to other things later on. This also has a brightness multiplier that has turned it down a lot. We're going to go ahead and turn that back up to final brightness mult to 1. So now this is before we get into any like crazy modifications. We can see all the various details here. And you can see that when it's past a certain brightness, it doesn't really look quite right. If you prefer to edit with the brightness down, there's certainly nothing stopping you from doing that. Now, there are a couple of different texture groups that are kind of your basics that are the nebula, and then there's some ones, there's two that are for your basic nebula shapes, And then there's two groups that are for what I call clusters, which are things that um, give you some extra toning and whatnot. So the very first one is neb1, and then all of these values here that start with neb1 refer to it. Now these are what are called triplanar textures, which means that instead of what we're looking at here is the inside of a giant sphere. And the triplanar textures are things that are not just wrapped around the sphere. Instead, we have a variety of copies of these. Now, it's much easier. See the tiling here? As I adjust the tiling up, get more copies of the texture. If I adjust it down, you get practically nothing. Here you have it just one, it's just like smudged across there. So you can kind of see how there's a bunch of copies of itself sliding across itself. That is the nature of a triplanar texture that is blending just one texture at all the different places. So um, this is using the tiling attribute to get different effects. Contrast here will let you get really harsh values, or let you get much softer values, including down to just really not having much contrast at all. You can have less contrast than one. If the values get hard to edit, then you can either make your sidebar wider, which makes this easier to mess with, or you can directly type in things like 0.07. Not that there's any difference between 0.07 and that. So let's find out something to start out with. Let's start with this being brighter. Now, the tint, when you apply a tint to something, this is what is called a diffuse multiplication. So specifically, if you multiply it by, um, interesting. Apparently, oh, right, yeah, okay. This is not a diffuse multiplication. It's actually a blend op, I think a multiply blend op. So it does a nicer blend operation than a diffuse would. So never mind on that. It's actually pretty nice. This shader is complicated. um, At this point, if I click select here, I don't really want this pattern again. I've already used this pattern recently. Now you'll notice that there are a variety of things that say neb underscore whatever. And again, those are from that other folder, and it's nice because they're all right here. So I can just start kind of clicking through these and see what sort of interesting things I might get, and if there's anything that I want to start working with. Now, a lot of these are very giving me almost nothing, and that might be because the power is off, or it might be because the contrast is kind of weird, um, or it might even be because the tiling is a little bit harsh. Some of these things don't work all that well as a triplanar texture unless you have a contrast value that's really a certain amount harsh, because they do tile, but they don't tile. These are all tiling textures, but they're not textures that tile. Um, you can't cut them arbitrarily, um, which is what it winds up happening. Some of the other ones, though, you can see you can cut them arbitrarily and they wind up looking kind of neat. For Neb1, I tend to try and pick something that's a little more cloudsy, because if it's blending mode, it works best as whatever your kind of base palette is. Incidentally, if you ever watched, The Joy of Painting with Bob Ross, basically this entire process is happy little accidents. So if you're going into this thinking, I'm going to create something super specific, good luck with that, because that's really not what this process is about. Um, it's really more of a process of just fiddling and seeing what comes out, because um, creating really specific skyboxes or nebula boxes is great when you're hand painting something, but it is really hard to get things to blend well when you're doing something that isn't statically hand painted. I've struggled with that for almost a decade now, back to before AI War the First even came out, and I finally figured out a way that to get around that, which is by using complex shaders where I kind of say, I don't really know what the output's going to be, but I have a lot of cool inputs and a lot of ways to adjust those inputs. We're going to find out what sort of output we get. And so you'll notice there's a bunch of weird colors. There's all sorts of different effects here. Um, this caviar one's pretty interesting. This is very um, it's giving me a little bit of detailing in there with the you can see those little bits right there. Um, I can turn down the power some if I don't want it to be quite so bright. And there's no particular reason for this to be purple. You can do this in whatever shade. It doesn't really even matter because I'm going to be doing some hue saturation value shifts later anyhow. A lot of times blue and red can be pretty easy to work in because they give you a good baseline. I don't ask me why blue and red are easier to work in, but I do find them easier to work in as far as creating a good baseline that can then be further modified. Um, okay. And I want something in this particular case, I'm feeling like I want this to be fairly desaturated. So, you can adjust this up and down here to change the hue. And then once you're in here, it's the, well, it says right there's the saturation, there's the brightness. So I'm been adjusting the saturation and the brightness a little bit, and this feels pretty reasonable. You'll notice there's some weirdo stuff going on there, possibly by adjusting contrast a little bit. Okay, that's not even from my particular material here, so I don't even have to worry about that. Um, the caviar effect, there's um, these cool little speckling things going on there. I like that. Um, let's make this stronger and then maybe up the contrast. Nope. Uh, strong. And let's see. Hmm. You know what? In this particular video, the Neb 1 and Neb 2 tiling look like they are switched. That's hilarious. Um, I will fix that before you get a chance to mess with it. Um, no, no, it's not. It can, because you're layering so many things on top of one another, it can be very hard to tell what you're doing. So you can take the power of some of the other stuff and just turn those down. So then we can go, okay, we're not getting anything out of those now. So now what we're looking at here is definitely just from Neb 1. So when we adjust the tiling, we see, okay, yeah, this is just coming from that. The contrast that we were seeing was coming just from that. And in that regard, I'm actually not as happy with the caviar one as a baseline here. Um, the explosions tend to lead to pretty nice results. Um, some of these things are not showing well right now because the contrast is set too high. If you set the contrast um, down lower, you can get some interesting results. Um, had to pause there real quick. Got a phone call from a spammer. Couldn't miss that. All right. Like I said, the contrast can kind of mess with that some. The tiling, ooh, nice. Now we're not having those black spots as much. I'm kind of wanting to use this as a baseline where, yeah, we're gonna have some black spots everywhere, which no matter what, which is fine. Um, I'm kind of wanting to use this anyway as a lower end. Um, and you hit Control Z to undo. Kind of want to use this as a lower end basic texture here. Um, just none of that's really doing what I want. Could use it like this and have very, very cloudy. That just doesn't feel right. Tuning one of these things can take a while. Ooh, kind of like this. Let's try this. Meaty ones. Those are too strong. Okay, so let's try this. Um, okay, so now we have this nonsense, and if we tile this more, nope, less is making it more nonsensical. Let's tile it more, and then let's down the contrast here. Just doesn't. Let's go with some Perlin. These are very loose ones. Swampy. There we go. All right, Swampy. Good. All right. So this is looking pretty cool. And leave it where it was and turn the power down some on that for now. Now, of course, this does not look great yet, but it's not really supposed to because we're at stage 1 of 4. And the point is to blend things on top of one another. I may revise this base version later, but we'll just see. So now let's turn up this one. Oh, look, suddenly it's looking better already. So we've got this thing here, which is our Neb 2 layer. Neb 2 is considerably easier to deal with. You can get some, ooh, nice orange streaks, kind of like that. You kind of have to see where it's gonna head versus where it is right this instant a lot of times. Let's try downing the tiling. And then downing the saturation bit there. So now we've got these cool streaks in here. It looks a lot more cloudy. Now, why do we have 2 sets of tiling? And then stuff that gets added on top? Well, as humans, we're really good at noticing patterns. And so we don't want there to be patterns. The only way for there to not be patterns that are easily recognizable is for us to have a variety of, well, in this case, 2 repeating patterns that are not repeated too much, and then to have some stuff on top of that. I'm going to add in stars while I'm talking here. And then to have some stuff on top of that that legitimately is not um, tiling at all. So depending on the tint of the star field that you use, you can get some kind of different results there. How about start faint 2? I've been using just the same star field for the most part, so may as well branch out. Um, okay, so you notice how this immediately is feeling a lot more like a space scene and not like some sort of weird abstract something. Neb 1 is still giving us a little bit of weirdness with the way that its tint is, but okay. So at this point, when I drag things, see, it's just not precise enough. So 0.4, ooh, that's better. What about 0.3? That's really probably not enough. What about 0.5? Let's just see what that even looks like. See, we're getting some good shapes there, but they don't look as drastic as they did at 0.6. Um, 0.4, I think that's good. See, they feel kind of more cloudish there, and I can adjust the power up probably um, because now they're feeling more sane. So adjusting the power up on that is good. And I can even do something a little different with the tinting. Now, the tinting is something we care about relative to itself. Uh, so, in other words, we're building one version of the colored star fields at the moment. And we care about the color of everything relative to each other within this. But then later we'll get into color variants of it. And because we've made something that's initially pleasing, everything slides around the color wheel so that it stays pleasing even when we go to other color variants, which is nice. Um, okay, so I think I might be able to go to Neb 2 here and actually up the contrast or down the contrast some here. Let's see, make it a little more severe. Now, up the contrast. Hey, you can get some unexpected results out of this, as you've undoubtedly noticed. Yeah, I want more wisps. I like these wisps, and I like the interplay of the dark and the light at this point. That's what I'm wanting to see more of. Um, getting a little bit repetitive in a few areas here. Um, yeah, that's good. That doesn't feel too repetitive there, and we're getting good wisps elsewhere, and we can still see Neb 1, so I'm happy. Okay. You'll notice that I blended in a little bit of purple with Neb 1, and so we wind up with that. All right, so now we've got two different types of clusters. The clusters use a mask and a pattern and a color. Um, one of the first things I want to note is that these Neb 1 and Neb 2, they're triplanar textures, and therefore adjusting their tiling and offset values does nothing. Normally, you can get a variety of basically the Neb 1 tiling and Neb 2 tiling takes the place of those. Um, these textures down here are all um, regular textures that are being mapped on the inside of this cube. And so they're just being stretched across it once. And the mask is a grayscale image here, and the white is how strongly whatever this texture is shows up. And then the tint comes in on there. One of them uses a multiply blend if you're a Photoshop user, and the next one uses a penlight blend. Okay, and so um, let's go ahead and turn this up a lot. because I want to be able to see what I'm doing here. And we'll change this to some crazy color for now. Okay, so there's the thing that I'm working on. I want to be able to see the thing that I'm working on at the moment, and then we'll get into making it, blend in properly. So I've already used this thing, so I want to do something else. First of all, there's only a few different cluster masks, and that's fine. If anybody wants to create any grayscale images and send them over, then we can add them in. But honestly, I don't think there's that many that are needed because they're all combinatorial. So let's try the snake here. Um, this one winds up, yep, don't pay attention to what the actual thing is that's being drawn. What we care about is where it's being drawn. That's what the mask is about. Um, and I can work with that. One of the things to bear in mind is that you can do offsets on this, oops, um, which I have. And so with your offsets, you can control where this thing gets drawn. You can click on the actual X and Y and have them drag around. And you can get some interesting results that way. Bear in mind that generally speaking, the player is going to be looking down like this at the view, or then down like this somewhat. So if it's stuff that's way up here, it won't be seen at all. And actually hide some stuff where there's bad seams up there in some occasions, and feel free to do that because they're just not going to see. So obviously this looks awful, but that's just because we're still in progress and I just want to see what I'm doing. So um, I've adjusted the offset so that it's a little more in the normal field of view here. You can also adjust the tiling. If you adjust the tiling to be less than 1, you're going to wind up with somewhere there being a sharp offset. There it is. Depending on how you're blending it, how strongly you're blending it in, it may not even be noticeable. Um, See, look at that. See how there's the bad. Even when you go above 1, it can mess stuff up. So um, that is referring to the mask now. So leaving the mask at 1, or else being very careful with how you adjust the mask is good, because the mask is black at all the edges. So all the edges will meet up with one another really well. Now with the patterns for this, they're getting masked by the mask. And so you can adjust their tiling and offset however you want, and it won't matter. They all tile, and yeah. So now we're actually getting some color contribution from the actual things here. So you'll know, ooh, that's already kind of cool. Green pollen again, lichens, ooh, I like that too. Um, Now, bear in mind that when I go, ooh, when I see something like that, I'm kind of envisioning what it will look like when I make it more faint. Um, and you'll also note that most of these things that I'm using are um, not your traditional space backgrounds that are based off of Perlin noise and um, clouds and stuff. Ooh, now that's cool. Bubble brains. All right. Um, the reason for that is that if you are, uh, they all look the same eventually. Eventually, all the space backgrounds start looking the same. But when artists do unique paintings, they tend to bring in unique elements. Now, at this point, I can adjust the tiling of one or both dimensions here if I want. You'll notice that there is a point right here that is the kind of rotational point. Unfortunately, because of how because of how I moved the mask, that point became visible. A lot of times that's invisible, so um, that's something that you can make sure that the mask tries to skip. Um, this is better. Okay, so we can see that we've got these cool nebula backgrounds here going along. Now this is very strong, obviously. Now I've got this kind of tealish tint to it, which I actually kind of like how this is two color. I'd like to go with more of an orange. Ooh, no, well, um, these are multiplicative, so you're going to get unexpected results. I go more orange and suddenly it's more green. Well, that original thing is more green. So the more you come over here, the more it's going to fade out the details. So you're not going to want to go too far with that. Ooh, that's kind of cool. Also kind of cool. Let's say I kind of like how these greens are coming in. All right, so then now I down the power quite a bit, probably to something below 1 usually. And so now we have these faint details that are in here, and we've broken up the pattern once. Now let's do it again. The pin light one works a little bit differently in terms of how it blends, but otherwise it's the same. You'll notice that the more you bring this in power-wise, the worse it's going to look, and that's fine. It's a pin light, so it's a very harsh sort of thing. The sock puppet has very few things. I like the strangler because he's very big. They're abstract um, um, noticing on my part of the different patterns. So let's, oops, don't want to mess with that. Offset only. See, there's our source point here, which we don't want to be emphasizing. So, but you can see how these things kind of tunnel towards it. That I'm cool with. All right, so now we've got this pattern going on, and this has been using this deal here. So let's do something else. Like and Z was something that was giving me an interesting result earlier. So it's green poly. The muscle one's giving me some kind of, all right, this is it right here. Orange streaks again. Using this in two very different ways in this particular pattern, in this particular nebula background. All right, so I can adjust this a variety of ways. And again, because this is a pin light, it's going to give you really unexpected results depending on how the colors multiply. If you are a color theory expert, then you can maybe anticipate what it's going to be, but otherwise just experiment. Turn that down some. I hate losing so much of it. That's coming out pretty well. So let's do this. Let's crank up the brightness on all this here, see what we can get. If I really keep this out here, keep this out here, and maybe make this a little brighter too. It's an unconventional thing for me to be doing. Gosh, that's pretty. Okay, so I've got this really cool, very light spacescape. So now we've got the final brightness mult. We can just turn that down all as a group. And now we've got more of the colors left behind. starting to look a little burned in a little bit there with some of it, but that's okay. Now I'm tempted to go with more kind of a reddish stars here. Um, Green might be kind of interesting. I hate to. All right, so let's do our lighting test here. So feels like night. This makes sense looking at the spider next to it. So let's see how much brighter we can get this without it starting to look weird. Okay, so it's like it's mid-morning now, basically, with the spider. Yeah, we're getting this cool color coming through, and the light doesn't feel like insane. It doesn't. This feels like a little kind of dawnish in some respects. Um, I'm liking this. I'm liking this a lot. I had no intentions of doing this, having this exact result. You know, I didn't know I was going to come out with this color scheme. I didn't know any of this. Now you might be thinking, oh, I want to create something that's blue, or I want to create something that's red. Don't worry about it. Create something that's all of the above. So, so let's see here. I'm going to call this morning, and I'm going to use that as my pattern for always. We'll call this morning blue orange. Now, I'm going to call that one done. So I'm going to hit Control D on it, and now I'm going to hit Apply Material to Space BG, and now morning blue orange 1 has been applied to it. Now, as much as possible, I'm going to stop messing with the stuff down there, and I'm just going to work on color variants, which means I'm going to be back up here, and I'm going to be messing with the hue and the saturation in particular, and maybe a little bit value. So this affects everything except for the star colors, which I did on purpose because I wanted the star colors to be able to be modified separately. Now, what you'll notice when there's a hue shift is you'll start getting banding at certain points where that may really not look right. And if you adjust the saturation down, then that can erase the banding. That's just part of the normal HSV sort of transforms. You can also adjust the value a little bit. Value is basically brightness, but it goes very quick in terms of how it adjusts things. So you have to be a little on the careful side. Um, you know, you can get a little nuts with it in a variety of ways. Um, you can practically white it out and make something really pastel. That's actually really cool. Huh. And then I take a final brightness mult here and turn this down a lot. That's pretty cool. Huh. Woo, bad looking, bad looking, bad looking, bad looking, bad looking. Whoa. Whoa, awful, 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 awful. All right, you come back around the other side. Gosh, that element there is a big problem, and so we will have to adjust that when we get to certain color strengths. All right, let's start over. All right, all of these back to 0, and actually the brightness mult should be 0.392. All right, so this is where we started. Let's try that again. Sometimes we just make a mess. So let's come across here some. And we're gonna wreck this area, but we'll fix that down the bottom. This is a particularly tricky, normally you can just go over with the hue some and it won't make it too big a deal. But this one is particularly prone to messing up. So what is that element? I think that is pin light. Yep, sure is. So turning that down some, either doing that or adjusting its color value there some so that it's not as strong of whites. Um, And you can adjust the colors relative to the rest of it too. Now these colors really start not meaning much because it's all relative to the pre-transformed other colors. So, whoa, we're getting some things I'm not real thrilled about. All right, well, that is kind of interesting. One of the things that is worth noting is that not really just trying to make a purple version of the other thing, because if I look at this one and apply it, I mean this is really cool, but just having a purple version of it, I'd be like, oh, it's that again, but purple. Now when I come to the purple one, this actually has its own feel to it, and I'm going to go ahead and change these to be like blue stars and maybe a bit brighter, very much brighter, um, and down the value some, make this a little harsher contrast on everything. So this is starting to get its own feel. I don't normally spend this much time on the individual colors, but sometimes you gotta. All right, and now that that stuff is brighter, I can down the brightness on the stars a bit. All right, it's not my favorite thing in the world, but it works. Make a copy of that. Oh, morning, and I'll name that purple. All right, now we've got our blue orange to fly. I tend to like to work off of whatever the previous adjusted version was. You don't have to, but I like doing it because it makes it so that whatever my changes are, they tend to cascade. And I like that because they get more and more divergent from the original. Just the starfit power up here a little. I like having all those stars. This is kind of an ugly shade of red though. Whoa, no. Hmm. Yeah, very bloody red sort of color going on. You know, when you see it without the um, background there, you can see it pretty well. This green here is a problem. Wait, nope, not that one. Yep, this one. This can't stay that color green. That's just not looking right. But we want some sort of color accent, so making that more purple, cool. Let's bring this thing back in. And okay, we'll undo a couple of things here. Okay. Back to our original shading more a little bit and see if we can get any sort of result that is at all tasteful. Now that kind of purplish look there does work. It's interesting, it likes to go to green as soon as, you can see that's what it is, but as soon as you get past a certain point, it wants to go green. Okay, at least we can see it here. All right, so morning blue orange, this morning red. Now, and we started with this, and now we've got this and this. So you can see there's a lot of payoff for these things that you start creating one pattern, and then it's like, okay, it's time for color variants. You get more than just a color variant. All right, so it's kind of a greeny-ish color. Let's go ahead and do that. And whoa, boy, those are some bright stars. Don't like that. Um, maybe more towards yellow. And for whatever reason, I want these stars to be very faint. Okay, I got this big like bloody splotch up there now. Like that either. It's not one to contribute much. So one of the things I will do on occasion, I don't do this all that often. Sometimes I will come in and say, you know what, for this particular, variant, let's get something else. Let's get a different texture in there. Better than having it just show not much of anything, These are not quite complementary colors, but I like, whoa, kind of a negative look to it. This contributes structurally without really adjusting the color. I like that. That's neat. Let's get our overall color a little nicer though. Can probably down the saturation a little. Let's see about the value too. Whoa, no. Let's not see about the value. Okay. We've got more of a green here. I like it. It's not my favorite ever, but one of the cool things is that in setting these up in the XML so they actually get used in the game, you can set what their frequency of appearing is. Later, we'll probably also make it so that it's like outer rim planets and dangerous planets and AI planets or something, so that we can kind of get the mood adjusting with them. All right, so we'll have our teal one. These stars are not at all what I would want. Ooh, I like that suddenly. Okay. Still have a weird green going on down here. That would be this cluster, I believe. Yep. Can we get something more blue, please? No. But we can get a contributory teal. It's a little bluish. All right, that was an easy one. Teal. All right, we'll see what this one's called, what this will be. Okay, very purpley sort of blue. Done. Dark blue. It's evolved enough that we'll wrap back around the color wheel potentially and have some more that are. I don't want any more purple, so I just don't need that right now. Reds. Having kind of a gold would be nice. Let's try and emphasize the gold with the star color here. Adding in some red accents tends to, or orangish accents tends to help with that. So this will be our gold one. This thing here is being a problem. Ooh, all right, yeah, finally. Adding some more kind of. Okay. I like how it gives us some kind of negative space without being too harsh in there. I do feel like one of these patterns is a little on the harsh side right now. Use this one. Yeah. Ooh, I like that. Could probably up the entire brightness a little bit. Maybe what we'll do is the value off. Ooh, yeah. And now that's messed up, but it's okay. How does this feel? This feels borderline. That feels better. Okay, now problem down there. Not green. That just disappears. Okay, we'll get some color contribution out of it with very, or excuse me, luminance contribution out of it with very little color. I think that's what we'll go for. All right. It's pretty bright, but I think this is livable. Maybe a little bit too bright. I think this is good. Better, worse, better. Okay. Gold. And we'll just kind of keep wrapping around here a little bit till we see that there's not something else that we want to do. So we've got this green, which is very attractive. We're really getting into different colors here now. We've got different variants because we've got this green already, which looks like this. That's very different. And then we've got our gold one here, which looks like this. Now I'm pretty tempted to say we don't need two of these that are so similar, but I don't like that one all that much. It's kind of makes me feel unhappy. I like this one. Let's get rid of this one. And we've got a new one here. Green. How's our purple looking? We can kind of come back through and look. So with the purple with the darker pieces in, I like that. It's good contrast. Red. I like how that goes. Teal. Let's see if we can make something off this green into teal. We can copy this, apply. Let's go the hue offset into our teal range. Here we go. Maybe a little less saturation. Maybe a little. Maybe leave both of those alone and just take the brightness down a tad. Cool. All right. So we got our green one. Now it becomes teal. Our other green one, is this too bright? Also could be a little more green. It's got a little yellow in it at the moment that I'm not less thrilled with. There we go. All right. Gold, green, purple, red, teal. The original, gosh, that's a good one. Blue, just the dark blue. Let's check out this teal and see if we can make one more blue version. We wind up with tons of blues, but so blue, oh, that's so much prettier. Even with the stupid green stars. Oh, that's pretty. All right. Dark blue is gonna die. We've got this new one here. Blue. I could have kept the other variants and stuff too, but I don't really want to flood the game with all of these. So, alrighty. At this point, I have what is that? 7 new materials. So I'll go ahead and show you. At this point, if you're wanting to submit them to us, then this is all you would need to do. But I'll go ahead and show you how I'm going to integrate these into the game by doing it. So I'm going to drag these into the for using folder. And all these things should be in AIW2 Nebula mats. These are for the official ones, but still. If you're creating your own, then you can create them in your put them in your own asset bundle. Looks like these are actually all already in there because I made a copy of it. But asset bundle, you can't see. Asset bundle, you can do a new one and make it, Bob's asset bundle, whatever. And then when you compile, it'll go over. So what I'm going to do is make sure and hit save all assets. Make sure and do that anyway, because it will make sure that all your stuff gets saved to disk, which sometimes it doesn't otherwise. And then build the Windows asset bundle. Now I'm going to pop open. I happen to already have it open in here, CMP spacebox definitions. These are different groups. Now the location for them is in wherever you installed the game, then game data configuration spacebox definition. And if you're making your own to create, you'd want to make a copy of mine and then get rid of all my definitions that are in there and have your own. In my case, I'm just adding to the existing ones. So we've got morning blue. So I put that in here. The weight normally would be 100. And so you see how frequently you want that to appear. So let's apply that. Regular frequency is fine with this one, basically, for me. And then paste this in here and then use Control U to make it lowercase. Ideally, it'll fix it for you if you don't do that. But all right, now we've got morning blue orange. Gosh, that's just a gorgeous one. Morning blue orange, double the normal weight on there. Morning blue orange. I also want to make a galaxy map version of this. And so actually what I'll do, I'll just make a copy of this, put it down here. Not going to specify a weight. Well, oh, I am 100. And then we say for galaxy map true, pop that in there. The name itself can be whatever. So just make it galaxy morning blue orange, and then it's referencing the same material in that same location. You'll notice that it's under same path we have here. So we've got assets, space BG, materials for using. So we've got here, assets, space BG, materials for using, and then the name of the map. All right, got our gold one. I like this one just fine. So we'll leave this at weight of 100 as well. 100, not 200. We've got our green. As far as greens go, this is one I particularly like. So done good work today. Put that in there. Purple. As far as purples go, I like this pretty well, but I don't really want to see that all the time. So I'm going to make this 70% in terms of its likelihood of showing up. And then red. This is a good red. As far as reds go, this is a good red. We'll go ahead and leave that at 100 as well. This purple, I'm going to bump this down to 50 actually. And that blue, just because we have a lot of blues, I'm going to bump that down to 80. Maybe the gold as well, and the green. Why not? Yeah. We've got the blue orange, which is really likely, and then the red. I just particularly like this red. We've got the morning teal. Oof. I mean, as far as teals, I mean, it's nice to have variety and stuff, but it's just not my favorite. So um, I want for that sort of thing to be able to show up every so often, but it is, we'll just put that at 10. And that gets thrown in the mix with all the rest of these things. And now we have some new stuff that'll show up. And when I load up the game, it will load up that as well. So now you know how to create skyboxes and integrate them. If you're creating them just for yourself, then you have to do the integration bits and put them into the XML and all that. If you're creating them to send to us, then all you need to do is create the mat files and then just send us the mat files. And if you have any unique textures that you create for the masks or anything else, then you can send those to us and make sure and let us know that we're allowed to use them. And we'll include those as needed. So, but in the main, hopefully there's enough stuff for you to be getting on with all the neb. I created a lot of values in the neb section in particular already. So, all right. Thank you for watching.